Hi there, I'm going to do a review for Syriana. This movie came out in 2005. It's directed by Stephen Goggin. I'm not sure anybody is familiar with his name, so it doesn't really matter. Um, Bit of a cast of characters in this movie. You have Matt Damon playing Brian Woodman. You got George Clooney playing Bob Barnes. You got Amanda Peet in there playing Julia Woodman. You got Christopher Plummer in here for Dean Whiting. You got Chris Cooper, Jeffrey Wright. Yeah, lots of names. Nonetheless, it's like this. I don't know. It's a different kind of movie. It's not like a normal movie. It's basically set up that the oil industry uh, has lots of interests in various countries. Not entirely clear where this is exactly taking place. There's multiple different locations where this is taking place. Not entirely clear which country this is actually happening in because the natural gas or oil contracts are describing don't really describe anything in particular. One could assume it's Saudi Arabia. I think some of this might be taking place in Jordan, maybe in Iraq. It's not entirely clear what locations it is. There's Egypt, although Egypt doesn't pump a lot of oil, so I don't know why they're in the movie. There's just a lot of stuff going on in this movie. Everybody has a different role. Not everybody's seen each other. Quite a few of the characters don't know each other. There's like three different story branches in this movie. Um, some of which sort of intertwine. Matt Damon plays a guy who's like an analyst. He's trying to give some advice to one of the princes there. Princess, I don't even know which prince it's supposed to be. It's not entirely clear. The Middle East is not that big of an area. It's not that large in terms of countries either. I mean, there's only a few countries there, and I'm not entirely sure who he is, what countries is run by which. The point is, he's kind of giving. He eventually ends up giving advice to a certain prince. Might be a new. Um, Not entirely clear as who it is or what it is. A reformer. But nonetheless, you got multiple storylines. You got Jeffrey Wright in here, who's like a lawyer for one of the oil companies, and they deal with numerous different people. George Clooney is apparently a spy, a secret agent. Not entirely clear what he is, although he does seem to be getting around and going around and I think he had a funny little punchline about the fact that I'm Canadian. He says, "Don't you see too many of those people around?" I guess the joke is that Canada doesn't have any interest in the Middle East because it's never really imported much. Supposedly hasn't imported much oil from the Middle East, even though the joke is actually Canada does import oil from lots of places. Um, Chris Cooper is in here as Jimmy Pope. He's kind of like this. Almost CEO type. It's actually kind of amusing to watch this movie because there's so many big names and they do so many different things, but nonetheless, it doesn't really have too much problems with casting. The cast is all pretty right on the money. They do a pretty good job with this movie. They know how to make the movie work. Even though they got three storylines going on, you got some guys dealing with some criminality. It's not entirely clear exactly whether or not anybody actually knows everything that's going on in this storyline. I don't think anybody knows all of it because they're involved in their own little individual situations and they don't really know about what's going on in other places. Because Matt Damon stuff all happens kind of isolated from the other people's, although sort of not. At times he's involved, other times he's involved with this situation involving a prince. Jeffrey Wright's involved with some people. Christopher Plum is there sometime. More or less, it's just about the fact that the confusing interests of corporations in this area. I'm guessing it's supposed to be the Middle East. It doesn't appear to be any particular location. The countries they name aren't entirely clear. I don't even think they actually uh, name any country in particular in this movie. I think it's supposed to be sort of anonymous for a reason. I think they were trying to keep it sort of anonymous just so that they could keep you sort of guessing as to who is what and what they are doing. Nonetheless, it's more or less about the fact that there's a lot of competing interests in the area, and a lot of competing interests in the company's hierarchy itself. It seems like I think there's pretty standard interest. The biggest problem I think the movie has is not the lack of focus, the lack of knowledge of what makes for a main character. There's no particular main character in the movie, and I think that's the biggest problem with the storyline is the lack of a main character and the lack of a main body to call upon. They all have their problems, but nonetheless, it works out in the end. They actually, it doesn't really work out in the end because certain people end up having situations where they almost lose their lives. Um, yeah, they have these problems where basically Christopher Plummer and even and his associates all are trying to aim for a problem, and it's hilarious. Yeah, he does have a good. Was it Chris Cooper has an interesting line about. He says, "What's an Emir, anyways?" He says, "It's a king. It's a king, sir." Um, I think that's the lowdown of what the whole story is about. Regardless, is that everybody's involved in a different way, and that's what makes the story kind of hard to deal with. Is that it is hard to deal with. Nonetheless, it works out well enough. It has enough. It knows how to deal with its situation. More or less. You got one set of guys trying to indict the other set of guys on crimes, although the criminality is kind of not entirely sincere criminality going on here. It's pretty silly pretty silly of them to be getting criminalization charges on certain people, considering it doesn't seem to mean anything. You got a lot of. It is funny with how George Clooney ends up mixing it up with all these different people because he's like a secret agent. He seems to know his way around the place. He comes under investigation, although it's not entirely clear what the investigation is about. It just seemed like he drew the short end of the stick rather randomly, which is sort of amusing. And that's basically the lowdown of his character is that he's like a spy, a double A. Not entirely clear what he is. He's just sort of around, sort of there. He's sort of doing things. Who knows what he's doing? They don't seem to know what he's doing. But nonetheless, he's. Well, I think it's sort of clear what he's doing. He's involved in a company, and of course, that company's hierarchy decides he has to be the low end of the stick, so he ends up having to go. So they have to decide to call him crazy and put him under investigation. Because the whole situation he was involved in gets put in the eyes view, and of course he was involved in that, and of course they have to put him in the system. And then they have other problems too, but nonetheless, it all runs into the same problem that these companies are having lots of different business interests at the same time, and it's quite clear that they're not really worried about what each other's doing. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a mucky story. That's the problem with Syriana. It's a mucky story. It's very unclear as to exactly what is going on. Or actually, it does have an interesting subplot there about a guy that was hired by a company, and then upon leaving, they all get, because their status as employees is over, they get told that they have to leave the country immediately. And of course, they end up being pulled into an organization for terror, because basically that's the reason why they joined the group, is because they are being fed the notion that there is something wrong fundamentally with the system, and that they've got to fight back against that system. So they end up being the ones that do. It's not entirely clear how bad that ending was, but it's very clear that they went in with the intentions of not getting out, and more or less they're going to disrupt world trade or something like that. But it's not too bad. I think the movie works well enough as it does because everybody's got a different problem in the movie. Everybody represents a different interest in the oil and natural gas sector. Basically, these are all just analysts and lawyers, and they don't. They at times they talk to each other, at other times they have nothing to do with each other. Um, yeah, it is actually funny. It's actually almost a comical movie, just how many things are going on in the movie, and it seems like everybody's under a different business interest. That's basically all you can describe about it. It's business interests in the oil industry. But yeah, it's good enough. Works well as a film. I liked it. I got a kick out of all the different things going on, like the fact that there's lots of people interacting, but they don't seem to have any commonalities other than the fact that they happen to be in the same business. It works out well enough for that. But yeah, well, a good enough movie. I don't think it's perfect, but it works well enough.